All right, so we are in, what is this now, week 4 of our series of jersey numbers?
Yep, that would make sense.
Yep. So we've kind of split the canon of jersey numbers into 5 chunks. This is week 4 of 5, and then next week we'll finish out with the last set of 20 jersey numbers. But this week we've got jerseys 60 to 79.
Yeah, and maybe this week, as much as any other week, more than any other week, there's some numbers in here that there's a couple of current players that are not what I would consider currently the best to be wearing their jersey number, but they could, by the end of their career, or even the end of their Vikings career, they could etch their name into those numbers. So I'll mention that as we go along. But I feel like the first episode we tried to do every other and kind of made a game of it, but there's so many we don't know because we only know less than half of Vikings history just based on what we've watched. So do we just want to go down the line and kind of say the numbers and kind of how we feel about these guys?
Yeah. How about you list off what you've got here, and then I put together kind of some not necessarily honorable mentions, but like guys that when I look at the list of each player to wear each number, I'm like, yeah, I remember that guy. Yeah. Because I was this year's old. This year's old. I was this old, and I remember this was the quarterback, and so on and so forth. So just names that stick out to me throughout my Vikings history, and I think kind of would resonate with you through most of yours as well.
Sweet.
So.
All right. So first one we're going to talk about tonight is number 60.
Yep.
This one...
This is a tough one to start with.
Aside from one guy who is the clear cut, this number is wide open for anybody else to stamp their name on it. The one guy, Roy Winston, a linebacker from 62 to 76, and we've mentioned, so we're getting all this information from ProFootballReference.com. They have their approximate value score, which kind of ranks players in their career. Roy Winston, his approximate value, is 109,
which is high.
Yeah,
it's quite high.
Like I wanted to look up Adrian Peterson's, which again, he's Hall of Fame level player. His approximate value, of course, it's going to take me longer than I wanted it to figure this out. Oh no. Dead air. That's the best. His approximate value is 129. So for Roy Winston to have 109, like that's pretty close. So
yeah.
Especially for a guy who, I'm sorry, fellow Vikings fans, I've never, to my knowledge, heard his name before today. So
you know who we need to consult on this.
We got our stat guy.
We got to consult Dennis. Dennis, if you're out there listening and watching on YouTube, drop us a comment below. Let us know what you know about Roy Winston. We would love to dive into your wealth of knowledge on the Vikings and share that with our community here. Because
Dennis, we're gonna need a total number of tackles for Roy Winston in his Vikings career.
Yeah, that's what's interesting though about looking at this guy. Like he kind of played in an era where especially defensive stats were kind of second thought.
Yeah, it was just stop the ball carrier. They didn't even take. I can't find any tackle stat for Roy Winston in his career.
There's nothing out there for tackles. They do have sacks recorded,
which is weird.
But when did they start recording sacks?
It's like 1982 or like anything after 82. Whenever that, it was right about then when stats became an official or sacks became an official stat. So
and Roy Winston played his whole career for the Vikings, 1962 to 1976.
Yeah,
as a linebacker. So.
And according to that approximate value, a pretty good career. So there's probably a ton of Vikings fans out there that remember this guy's name. Sorry, Roy, you were just before our time. We don't remember you, but glad you're a good Viking.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was number 60. Really not much after Winston. It's
one of those numbers that, I mean, if you're looking for a number to make your own in the Vikings franchise, that might be one to go after. So, all right. What about 61?
61 was interesting. So the guy that Pro Football Reference has the highest score for was someone named Wes Hamilton. He was a guard that played from 76 to 84 with Minnesota. His approximate value is 47, at least with the Vikings. I don't remember if he played anywhere else. I think just the Vikings. But this number seems to be a little bit more close of a race. Larry Bowie is second with a value of 35, another guy from the 60s. Joe Berger, who kind of started off as a backup depth guy and really came in and turned into a starter. And I remember he got like a re-upped contract, even though they didn't have to, because he was still under contract for a few more years just to give him a higher pay raise. He has a value of 32. After that, though, not a whole ton.
Kind of falls after that, but I have Joe as kind of my honorable mention / like player from our era that kind of stands out at number 61. So yeah, he was a guard and a center from 2011 to 2017, and I mean, he is noteworthy enough that most Vikings fans from that era would at least know his name.
Yeah, Joe Berger kind of took over for John Sullivan towards the end of John Sullivan's Vikings career as a center. And his name may come up here in a couple numbers, but yeah.
Berger has a total AV of 42.
Yeah,
he played for the Dolphins and the Cowboys kind of back and forth before coming to Minnesota in 2011.
Yeah, and he was a nice, solidifying light for the offensive line in a few years where the O-line was pretty rough. Berger was a nice surprise and a good, solidifying presence on the line. So, yeah, I definitely appreciated his Vikings career.
All right, 62. Who do we got?
Oh, man. All right, Pro Football Reference has guard / tackle Ed White from 69 to 77. He played for the Vikings. AV of 59, so half as much as Roy Winston. Yeah, I've heard his name before, but not anything I specifically remember. Can you think of anybody 62?
Yeah, so the starting center in the 98 season, arguably one of the best seasons in Vikings history, Jeff Christie, wore that number. And he was not just good in 98, but he was pretty solid as a center for the Vikings from 93 to 98. Or 99, sorry. And then he left and went to Tampa Bay for a couple seasons after that. But Pro Bowler. And
he's got a similar, Christie has a similar AV of 52, close to that 59. So
and a career AV of 74.
Yeah. So overall, probably a better player maybe than Ed White career-wise, but Vikings career-wise, it's a little bit different.
Do you know what else is significant about the number 62 today?
Oh, man. What's that, Ev?
Today's July 8th. 62 days. Until Vikings football is back. 62 days until the first regular season game.
Oh, man.
Until we play
so football's really going to
Giants.
be back before then. It's going to feel like it's back before then.
Well, we're definitely at the bottom of the hill, getting ready to make our way back up. It's coming.
Well, Dustin Baker has said before, July 4th seems to, he may even say this later in our episode tonight, July 4th seems to be a good turning point for the season to kind of switch over. And lo and behold, we just passed July 4th. So, yeah.
2 months. 2 months to go.
Let's do it. We can make it.
All right, 63. We got to keep going because we got a ways to go here.
Yeah, we do. All right, 63. Kirk Loudermilk played for the Vikings from 85 to 92. An AV of 43, which seems to be good enough. Did not watch this guy. He was the center for the Vikings when I was born. So I don't remember him very much at all. The Loudermilk name kind of rings a bell. I think there was a Hawkeye, an Iowa Hawkeye, like a defensive back in the last handful of years that at least his last name was Loudermilk. I don't know if there's any relation there. Other than him, 63, Brandon Fusco.
I pronounce it Fusco.
Fusco? Well, I don't know who's right. So
I'm going to go with Fusco because that's how I've always said it.
There you go.
I've got him on my list. 63. He was a good guard for the Vikings. Just solid presence there. Started quite a few games. And I feel like starting games at that guard position, tackle position, even the center, just anything on the offensive line, since there are no stats.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, some advanced stats nowadays that you can kind of dig into, but the more readily available stats just aren't there for offensive linemen. So I feel like that's a badge of honor. Like if you start games as an offensive lineman and you rack up those starts, the more you rack up, that's a good thing. And Brandon Fusco started 64 out of 67 appearances for the Vikings.
And importantly, he was a starting guard for Adrian Peterson's 2012 MVP year. So that's
true.
That's something to say. I mean, the offensive line is a huge piece of a running back's success. So,
and he started all 16 games that season. So he was there at the right guard position for all of those.
All right, 64. Who do we got, Ev?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I don't know. How could we ever find somebody that's good at the number 64? Oh, wait, Randall McDaniel. That's right.
Oh, maybe the best player in Vikings history.
No doubt.
Yeah.
From 88 to 99, AV of 158.
Yeah, as compared to the highest AV to where 63, who had Loudermilk with 43. His right. AV... You could take away Loudermilk's AV and Randall McDaniel would still have over 100 and still be a Hall of Fame worthy player. But
if there was another number that the Vikings could consider retiring, 64 could be on that short list of numbers. That
I don't know who'd be mad about that. It's just they continue to let people wear it. It didn't even really have too long after McDaniel at least left the Vikings before somebody else picked it up. Yep. I think the next one was in 05. Well, Anthony Herrera. He was pretty good.
Yeah, Herrera wasn't bad. And then Blake Brandel, I think, is currently wearing it, right?
Yep.
So, there you
go. All right.
65.
65. So, before I looked at this list, there's a big name that I'm sure most Vikings fans have heard of if you didn't watch this guy before, Gary Zimmerman from 86 to 92. But before I looked this list up, my best 65 John Sullivan. I mean, he was, you said it earlier, he was Brett Favre's, I think it was just Sullivan's rookie year, or maybe his second year in 09. Yeah, I think he was a second-year player in 09 when he started every game with Brett Favre under center. So
So he was the center. He appeared in 16 games but didn't start the previous year, his rookie year, and then started all 16 games in 09, that first year with Brett Favre. And I have him on my list as a pretty notable 65. It's hard not to note somebody that was literally snapping the ball to one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Yeah, and again, not to completely gloss over Zimmerman. Zimmerman's AV was 72. Sullivan's was 44, at least with the Vikings. I know Sullivan went on to play for two other teams.
Yeah, he played for Washington and the Rams.
Oh, yeah. He went to the Super Bowl with the Rams, I think, when they lost to... I forget who they lost to, but it was Jared Goff's Rams Super Bowl. But, yeah, I mean, Sullivan, he was one of my favorite players when he was on the Vikings. I think he's just a solid, good dude. So, yeah, he's my favorite 65.
A couple of other notable ones. Charlie Johnson.
Okay.
There's actually been two Charlie Johnsons. I have Charlie Johnson on here twice. There were two Charlie Johnsons. One that wore 64 from
the other
11.
one wore 74.
74, yeah. So 64 or 65, sorry, was 82 to 84. Different guy. When I saw the name, I was like, "Oh, hey,
yeah,
I know that guy." Anyways, my mistake. Pat Elflein though, wore that number. He was so.
I think he's still kind of bouncing around the league.
And Austin Schlottman.
Yeah, he could have
been.
He still can. He's just not on the Vikings anymore. I liked Schlottman a lot.
He was a good backup center, and it was nice to know that we had him in our back pocket, especially with Bradbury's back injuries.
Yeah, and now he's on the on the Giants, so they've got a good one, at least a good backup, if not somebody that can step in and start games.
All right, 66.
Currently, we got Dalton Reisner.
Currently wearing
66.
Yep. This is another one of those numbers, though, where there's only one other player in Vikings history with an AV above 10.
Yeah, and that's Terry Tausch. Played for the Vikes from 82 to 88 with an AV of 37. Sorry, Terry. If somebody wants to come in, I think the jury's still out. Even if Reisner wanted to come in and make himself the best 66 in Vikings history, he still can. The door is definitely open, even for Reisner, who's 28 28 or so years old.
Yeah.
He could still come in and do that.
Yeah, so Terry Tausch, he started 68 games for the Vikings.
Yeah.
Played for the Niners for one season, it looked like. Didn't start any games for them. So most of his career was spent with the Vikes. And those were kind of some rough years for the Vikings, the 80s. Pretty much all of the 80s were pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyways, Terry Tausch, there you go. 67?
67. We got Grady Alderman. From 61 to 74, I think he might have been the first 67 in Vikings history. An AV of 106. Yeah, I don't think, unless you're a Hall of Famer, sorry, Ed Ingram, unless you're a Hall of Famer, you're not going to end up being the best 67 in Vikings history. You got to get past Grady for that.
So multiple time Pro Bowler, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-time Pro Bowler.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of All Pro votes. I don't know that he was ever voted All Pro, but yeah. Some really, really good years for the Vikings. He was drafted by the Lions.
Yep. The year before the Vikings started playing. I saw that earlier.
And then made his way to Minnesota for his sophomore campaign and was with the Vikings for the rest of his career, mostly at left tackle.
Yeah.
So again, one of those non-sexy positions where stats just really aren't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But was pretty solid at that left tackle position through some really, really good years of Vikings football.
Oh, yeah. Some of the best years.
So, Dennis, again, fill us in if you know anything about Grady Alderman.
Yeah.
But other than him, you got Dennis Swilly from 77 to 87, and then Ed Ingram currently wears that number.
Yeah, I think the jury's still out on Ingram. He kind of started off a little slow, stepped on Cousins' foot a couple of times.
More than a few.
Although after, the first 4 or 5 games last year, where he started off a little slow in his second year, he started to turn it around. So the jury's still out. He's entering his third year in the league, Ed Ingram is. So he could still turn into something. Get a few Pro Bowls under his belt. He could, I know I just said you probably won't, but he could theoretically take the lead above Grady Alderman, but I wouldn't put money on that. 68.
That's another one of those tough ones where it's just like there's not a lot here. There are some guys that have been maybe flashes in the pan, but
I must say 68 is my favorite number. When I did play football, which when I was on the team, I shouldn't say play because I never played. When I was on the team, I wore 68 on the bench.
I bet you looked good in 68.
I have the body type for 68. Let's just say that. But I have a personalized Vikings jersey for 68. So maybe to me, I'm the best Viking. No, I'm just kidding. I can't say that. But 68, Charles Goodrum from 73 to 79 got an AV of 41. So I don't know who currently wears it, if anybody right now. This says Henry Bird wore it in 2023.
Is he even on the team anymore?
I don't really know. We are terrible Vikings fans, but somebody could take a run at that number. I mean, if you were a good player and get a handful of Pro Bowls, sorry, Charles, they could take 68 away from you. So if you're an up and coming Viking and you play defensive tackle or offensive line, come get 68 and have a day. Anybody you can think of? This list is pretty light. TJ Clemmings wore it.
It's tough. Yeah, there's not a lot there. But Goodrum, he was on, what was it, 2 Super Bowl teams?
Yeah, I mean,
3 Super Bowl teams, 74, 75, 77.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, maybe he wasn't the greatest, but he started all 12 games in 74.
Oh, this is terrible. I'm sorry. That was way louder than I thought it would be.
It's all good. Tin foil coming off the beer. No worries. He started every game in his 3 Super Bowl seasons.
Yeah.
If I'm counting correctly and I'm looking at the right thing. So to start he was a tackle for his first 3 seasons and then a guard, all on the left side, it looks like. But yeah, to start all of those games and go to 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, that's a solid career right there.
For sure.
All right, 69. Can you think of anybody I don't know. This joke is not even getting old to me.
No, we actually we were there when he was inducted into the Ring of Honor.
The great.
He rode in on a freaking horse.
Yeah, mullet flowing.
It was amazing. We have commemorative mullets somewhere.
We literally do. It's somewhere around here.
It's around here somewhere.
Of course, we're talking about future Hall of Famer. He's not in yet. I think he's one of few people to be a finalist 4 times and not get in. He will be in. If he's not, then stop watching football. But Jared Allen. Jared Allen, drafted by the Chiefs, played with the Vikings, and then kind of had a couple of weird years with the Bears and a Super Bowl losing year with the Panthers. But yeah, Jared Allen, AV of 75 with the Vikings. Honestly, his career with the Vikings was probably too short. 6 seasons, 5-6 seasons, yeah, maybe
Something
7. After him, it was Doug Sutherland as far as next best player to wear 69. And then pretty close after, those guys is Rashad Hill at 16 with an AV. So
yeah, he's on my list of just notable names to wear other than the obvious Jared Allen.
Mm-hmm.
And Rashad Hill was never a starter. He only had 22 starts, but he appeared in 74 games for the Vikings. So, and he was on the team from 16 to 21. So just a solid presence, I think, mostly at right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Jared Allen's another guy, he was way better he played longer. He was better for the Vikings. But he also could be considered one of the best 69s for the Kansas City Chiefs. Just looking it up right here, he's second in AV for the Chiefs to wear 69. The first is a guy that played from 60 to 67, Cheryl Hedrick. But we're not a Chiefs podcast. We're a Vikings podcast. Jared Allen was good. I guess that's my whole point.
Moving on to number 70. We could probably just gloss over this one because there's only ever been one person to wear the number.
We can't gloss over this.
But we can't gloss over this because he's arguably one of the greatest Vikings of all time.
Yeah. And
that's why there's only been one number 70 in Vikings history, and that's the great Jim Marshall.
The great Jim Marshall, who it is a travesty that he is not in the Hall of Fame.
That is true.
I almost don't care about the Hall of Fame until he gets in. I know it just like the Pro Bowl, the Hall of Fame is a major popularity contest, but there's guys that you just know, like Brett Favre. I think famously the committee, talked for about 2 seconds until they were all like, yeah, Brett Favre in. Yes, he's in. Jim Marshall, to me, he's in. He's in. He's just, you don't have to be a diehard Vikings fan to know that he is a Hall of Famer. Get him in. Come on, Hall of Fame. What are you doing?
I'm looking at the stat line for Jim Marshall right now.
It's too long. You have to scroll a couple of times.
It's crazy. So he was drafted by the Browns in 1960, which is a year before the Vikings were in existence. Another one of those players that kind of predates the Vikings as a franchise. But once he made his way to Minnesota in 61, the first year of the franchise's existence, he was there until he retired in 1979 for the better part of 2 decades.
Had 270 straight starts.
He never missed a game. He started every single game that he played in.
When Brett Favre broke the record for most, consecutive starts, he broke Jim Marshall's record.
I know.
This Jim Marshall needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and the Hall of Fame was a joke until they let him in. It's crazy. It's crazy that he's not in. But rightfully so, he's got his number retired. Nobody can ever wear that number again for the Vikings. And fun fact, Marshall on How I Met Your Mother was named after Jim Marshall.
Yeah, you sent me a really interesting article.
Yeah.
Last week or 2 weeks ago about the connection between, was it a writer on the show?
Yeah. So I think, so we'll get off on a tangent here.
We'll link the article.
The article is written by Matthew Collar, and he was trying to get to the bottom of a very famous Vikings GIF that's out there on the internet. It's the famous one of Marshall Erickson. What's his the actor's name? Seagal Patrick. That what it? Jason
Seagal.
Yeah.
Seagal. Something like that.
It's of him at a Vikings bar, and the GIF is just him pounding the table and saying, "Damn!" And
because he's responding to, you're talking about the '98 NFC Championship game. Damn.
Yeah, he's wearing that number 70 Jim Marshall jersey, which I learned through Matthew Coller's article. That jersey that Marshall Erickson wore on the show How I Met Your Mother was gifted it was lent to the show from the Vikings.
And it was Jim Marshall's jersey.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a game worn thing or not. That would have been pretty insane for the Vikings to do. But yeah, it's a really good article. We'll link to it. Matthew Coller did a really good job getting to the bottom of this, 0.2 second GIF that's out there that I probably sent to Evan, and he's probably sent to me about a billion times. If you're a Vikings fan who is on social media, you have seen this GIF, even if you don't like How I Met Your Mother. But yeah, it's all because of Jim Marshall.
And if you don't like How I Met Your Mother, what are you doing with your life?
Come on. It's fun. It just enriches your life. It's cheesy, but it's good.
I think it's back on Netflix.
It's somewhere. If you can't, it's somewhere.
It's on Hulu for sure, and I'm pretty sure it's back on Netflix, which means no ads, which is the best.
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
So, all right. Number 70, Jim Marshall.
Put him in the Hall of Fame.
We weren't alive, but we just know as lifelong Vikings fans how incredible he was.
A purple people eater.
He was a purple people eater, and yes, I back you 100%. We should start a petition. Let's get Jim Marshall into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Also, can I get off on an even less important tangent for half a second? Is that okay? Madden, if you play Madden, you can make somebody wear number 70 for the Vikings. Their whole thing is if it's on the field, it's in the game. Make retired numbers not available for these teams. I don't want to see a number 70 for the Vikings from some, undrafted guy that won't make the team. They can't do it in real life. Don't let them do it in Madden.
Is there a 68 on your team?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to look.
That's your number.
I don't put myself in the. We've already gotten too deep into Madden tangent right now. Anyways.
All right. Anyways, moving on. 71. Number 71. Who is the best Viking to wear 71?
This is a good number. There's some good guys at the top of the list. And the current guy, Christian Darrisaw, he's got a chance to own the number outright. So David Dixon.
Yep.
David Dixon from 94 to 04. He was the Vikings, I think he was a left tackle.
Guard.
A guard. He was a Vikings starting guard when I first started becoming a fan. His AV is 75. He's really good. So Christian Darrisaw, who currently wears that number, he would have to continue his tear of being a great left tackle to maybe have a chance of taking the outright best 71 in Vikings history, but I could see that happening. There's a couple other names on this list of best Vikings to wear 71.
Yeah, so Darrisaw, obviously, Phil Lodeholt was another one that stuck out to me.
That guy was a massive giant.
He was a
still is
big piece of man.
Yes.
He was a chunk. But yeah,
in the best way possible.
Yeah, in exactly what you want.
Yeah.
At the kind of the corner of the offensive line and preventing people from coming after your quarterback.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he played right tackle too, which makes it all the more impressive. Riley Reif, who played, I guess he only played 4 seasons for the Vikings, which is kind of crazy. Reif was one of those guys. He's got probably, a solid career's worth spread out between a few different teams, notably the Lions and the Vikings, and then he kind of bounced around. Is he still in the league? I think he might still be.
He might be. Yeah, he played for New England last year.
Okay.
Only played in 1 game, but
okay.
Was with the Patriots. So.
Yeah, Reif was good. He was a starting right tackle, left tackle for the Case Keenum NFC Championship year. So,
and he's an Iowa grad, so went to the University of Iowa. He's from South Dakota, but played his college days right here, just down the road in Iowa City. So there you go.
Also a Culpepper. There's 2 Culpeppers in Vikings history, and one of them is Ed.
Ed Culpepper played 1 year, the first year.
Yeah, his AV is not too high, but it's a fun Vikings name. So
yeah. All right, 72.
72. I think we'll hear this a little bit later. Is this one of the ones that Dustin might mention later?
Yeah, he might.
So the best ever so far is James White for the Vikings, a guy who played from 76 to 83, a defensive tackle. His AV is 42. So pretty okay, but not Hall of Fame crazy numbers. Interestingly, tied for second for the best ever, at least as far as Pro Football Reference goes, Ezra Cleveland, who was traded away last year.
Yeah, Ezra Cleveland is up there in the players to wear 72 for the Vikings, and traded away, and that was kind of an interesting storyline to follow last season. But turned out to be okay for the Vikings, I guess.
Yeah, a sneaky name for the Vikings in 2016, that offensive line, they were going down like flies. So at one point they had to sign Jake Long, who was a former number 1 overall pick for the Dolphins. But by the time he got to the Vikings, he was getting toward, that was the end of his career, was the 4 games he played for Minnesota. And he ended it with I think it was a pretty good knee injury. But yeah, he wore 72 as well. So this is another number if you're an up-and-coming Viking.
Interestingly enough, he was a 4-time Pro Bowler for the Dolphins.
Yeah, he was really good. I think his injury, he just got bit by the injury bug a little too much. So he could have been great. He was just ended up being pretty darn good. I don't know who's currently wearing that number, if anybody. But there's a chance if you can get a few Pro Bowls, you can usurp James White for that best ever to wear 72.
What about 73?
73. The first player that comes to mind when I think of 73 is Sharif Floyd.
Yeah.
One of those 3 first-round picks in, 2012, 2013, with Xavier Rhodes and Cordero Patterson. He was on his way. He would have ended up being maybe the second or third best Viking to wear 73. Also, Sharif Floyd wore 95 his first year because 73 wasn't available. But the best ever was, I believe, the Vikings' only first overall pick that they've made, Ron Yeri.
Yeah. Yep, first overall in 1968.
Yeah, he solidified that offensive line for a long time for the Vikings. Played from 68 to 81 for the Vikings.
7-time Pro Bowler and 6-time All-Pro.
Yeah, a Vikings AV of 135, one of the highest we'll see on this list.
Yep, pretty incredible. I had Todd Stussy actually at 73. Just another notable name. He played kind of during that prime era of my childhood.
Yeah, in 98. That's a significant year.
And I mentioned this earlier, but Todd Stussy had 111 games appearances for the Vikings, and he started all of them.
That's wild.
So
to not miss a game for injury at all, that's crazy.
Just very consistent. He ended up leaving in 2000 after the 2000 season, went to Carolina. Looks like he had a couple of good years, and then he bounced around after that, Tampa Bay, St. Louis. But Todd Stussy, couple-time Pro Bowler, got a few All-Pro votes in 97, 98, left tackle during that historic 98 season. So, yeah, he's definitely a name that stands out to me, and one that, when I think back to that era of Vikings football, he definitely comes to mind. And he has a really memorable last name,
yeah.
too.
I mean, that's one that maybe it's, sneaky, more common than you think it is, but if I ever heard somebody named Stussy, instantly I'd be like, wait, are you related to Todd?
All right, 74.
Yeah, 74. So the best one so far by a mile is Bryant McKinnie.
Yeah. Who he knows Dustin Baker pretty well, and Dustin's going to talk about Bryant McKinnie at length here in a little bit in our interview with him. So,
Dustin,
a little teaser.
Dustin, if you happen to be listening back, next time we talk, I'm going to work the courage up to see if we can somehow get some kind of an introduction to Bryant McKinnie, because that would be awesome. He is one of the more memorable Vikings players in my fanhood years. Really good left tackle. Even won a Super Bowl towards the end of his career with the Ravens. And he shared an offensive line with the Ravens in that Super Bowl win with Matt Burke, who we may talk about later, another former Viking. So, yeah, he's got a Vikings AV of 67. Next up is Charlie Johnson, who took over at that left tackle spot, and the 74 number the year after Bryant McKinnie went on to, I believe it was just straight to Baltimore. So yeah, Charlie Johnson next up. He's got a 28 AV. So outside of Bryant McKinney, that number could be had. So I think a Hall of Famer could take it over, but it would take quite a bit to take it over from Bryant.
A couple other just minor names, but still contributors to the Vikings in the last handful of years. Mike Remmers wore it in 17 and 18, and then Ole Udoh wore it for 4 years.
Yeah, and he just went on to another team. I think he's a Saint now. And currently it's someone named Spencer Rowland for the Vikings who holds that number, and I don't know anything about him. So
there you go. What about 75?
75. This is another number that there's some good names. And at the top of the list, you've got Keith Millard. Played for the Vikings from 85 to 90, so 6 seasons. An AV of 60. And up until a few years ago, had a firm hold of that number. Matt Khalil kind of made a run for it until he just stopped being able to play good football. But in 2018, the Vikings drafted Brian O'Neill, who is currently number 2 on the list of best 75s in Vikings history, and he's still playing and could take over that number. So Millard, I think I just said his AV is 60. Brian O'Neill, currently his AV is 47, and I mean, he's still in his 20s of age. I forget how old he is right now, but he's got some good years of football left in him. O'Neill could easily, a decade from now, be considered the best 75, which is crazy because Millard was really good too.
And interestingly enough, Matt Burke wore that number his first season in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
Which was 98.
I think I did know that at one point, but obviously had forgotten about it.
He wasn't obviously the starting center, but he was on the bench as a center and wore that number, and he appeared in 7 games.
Yeah.
So there you go. Matt Burke wore that number as well.
Nice. All right, 76. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here, almost done. First name I think of is Steve Hutchinson.
Yep, for sure.
Current Hall of Famer. He played for the Vikings, the Seahawks. I think he finished off with the Titans. Maybe another team or two. No, I think that's it. And he's a guy, Steve Hutchinson is, that he would have had a solid career if you only looked at his Seahawks numbers or only looked at his Vikings numbers. Like if he had only played, the years that he was on those teams and nothing else, he still would have had a solid career. But really good guy. Still not the best to ever wear 76, apparently.
But a 7-time Pro Bowler and a 5-time All-Pro, first-team All-Pro, between the Seahawks and the Vikings. So pretty outstanding career.
Yeah. The best, according to Pro Football Reference, though, is Tim Irwin. A tackle from 81 to 93. His score was 91. I believe he played for 3 teams here, but mostly for the Vikings. So for Hutchinson to play half of the time of his career that Tim Irwin did for the Vikings and to still not be terribly far behind, like that's pretty good.
Another notable name that I had here was Chris Lewinsky.
Oh, yeah. Another 98 guy.
On the team in 98. Kind of bounced back and forth between tackle and guard. I would say he mostly played guard, but he was in his rookie season on that 98 team, played in a game. So he got a taste of the greatness and then went on to kind of bolster that offensive line for 4 seasons. Looks like maybe he dealt with some injury or lost the starting job at some point before being traded away to Arizona. So,
All right, 77. It's a retired Vikings number.
Yes, it's retired and for good reason. Corey Stringer, and I'll talk about this later on when we interview Dustin Baker. But I referenced this article from the Star Tribune. Got a little cutout here with Randy Moss at Corey Stringer's funeral. He was offensive lineman, passed away from complications after a heat stroke during Vikings training camp in 2000.
Yeah, pretty tragic. Dustin does kind of talk, pretty cool memory, how I think he got to meet Corey Stringer a few times. Yeah. Really casually too. So again, just to mention tragedy for the Vikings this week's pretty tough too, because they just lost Kyrie Jackson. another tragic. I feel like this team has been bitten by tragedy a few times in its existence, and it kind of sucks. But rightfully so. 77 is retired for a guy that would have gone on, without question, to be the best 77 in history. But apparently on the field, as far as stats go, Gary Larson was statistically the best 77 in Vikings history with an AV of 85. And he played for the Vikings from 65 to 74, so 10 seasons.
Yeah, yep. Here you go. All right, a couple more here. 78.
78. For me, it's Matt Burke. I don't need to look at any other number. There's a couple other names kind of up there too. Also, I was wrong earlier, just to kind of back up a little bit. The number 77, there was a different Culpepper to wear that number in the 90s.
So there were 3 Culpeppers in Vikings history.
Yep. So anyway, 78, Matt Burke. He is the Pro Football Reference best to ever wear 77. Somewhat close behind him, Matt Burke's got a score of 79. The next up is a score of 65, Steve Riley, who played for 11 seasons, 74 to 84. So
I've got Dakota Dozier on my list.
yeah, he was a recent Viking.
Yeah, recent. And, I mean, he started every game in 2020.
Oh, Evan, please don't say he was good, because he was terrible, and they just didn't leave. They didn't go away from him.
I know, but he was there.
He was there. He was barely there. A lot of plays he basically was not. He was a turnstile.
He was there.
Again, I'm sure he's a good dude, but man, he contributed a lot of sacks against the Vikings in those couple of years.
How about Michael Pierce in 2021? How do you feel about him?
I don't like that guy. He opted out his the COVID year after signing a big free agent contract with the Vikings. So a few weeks later, opted out for the whole season, and then never did anything for the Vikings.
He went back to the Ravens.
Yeah. So Michael Pierce, again, I'm sure you're a good dude. You ended up giving up your number back to Everson Griffin, which I believe we'll talk about again later. But you were a paycheck chaser for the Vikings, and then you went back to Baltimore. So, again, sure, you're a good dude, but you didn't do my team any good. So,
79. Let's finish out this list here.
Yeah. All right, 79. Was this the other one that...
This could be one that's still kind of very much up for grabs.
Yeah.
So
come get it.
The top one is who?
Doug Martin. Played for the Vikings from 80 to 89. Defensive end. AV of 56. He's a first-round pick in the 80 draft for the Vikes. Only ever played for the Vikings. Yeah.
Defensive end had 11.5 sacks in 82. Arguably his best season.
Yeah.
Only played in 9 games. Only started 9 games. But
Yeah, so if somebody wants to come and put a stamp on a number, I mean, 56 is respectable, but again, a Hall of Famer would definitely easily take that number over. So come get it.
79.
Yep.
You said 56.
Oh, I meant, if I said 56, that was Doug Martin's AV score.
I see what you're saying. All right.
Another fun note about that 79 number, former Viking Mike Harris. I believe he's the one that ultimately had to retire from football because at some physical they found, I'm going to get this wrong, it was a physical a physical issue. I think it was like a heart defect or something, which maybe a neck thing. He had to retire ultimately because it was one of those like, hey, if you keep playing, this could get you. But then he ended up working for the Vikings. He may still work for the Vikings. I know for a minute he was the guy that inspected everybody's uniform before they went out on the field for games. So, yeah.
There you go. Well, that's going to round out our 4th of 5 weeks in this number series.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned a few times as we kind of went through that list, we'll chat with Dustin Baker here. And at the end of our chat with him, we kind of asked him, like, hey, what do you think about the best Vikings to wear some of those numbers from 60 to 79? So he'll give us his thoughts on those. And Yeah, we had a great time chatting with him too. We always do.
Yep, you guys will love it. It was a good chat.
All right, man. Well, good episode.
Yeah, best episode yet.
Skol.
Skol.
Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.